Hi, everybody. Welcome back to HSP TV. I am your host, Barbara, and today I'm joined by the wonderful Brittany Lata. And we are going to be talking about boundaries and why boundaries matter and why so many people have difficulty setting and maintaining their boundaries. I've been looking forward to this talk because it's an incredibly important topic. So thank you so much for being my guest today, Brittany. I love having you.
So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we did a little pre-talk the other day about what our topic is going to be today, and you shared a little bit about your personal story, which I think is the main reason why we are now talking about boundaries. So would you share a little bit about it with us?
Yeah, 100%. So, just a little bit about me currently. Today, I am a licensed psychotherapist and I work a lot with survivors of trauma and the LGBTQ community. And I am accepting clients online here in Cali. Um, But this is a topic that continues to get brought up with my clients, and it's something that I discovered in my own therapy that was like a huge issue of mine. I remember my therapist consistently telling me like, do you know what codependency is? Do you know what codependency is?" And like when I started actually doing work around boundaries, so much of my life changed for the better. So, a little backstory on that. I was born into divorced parents and very much put in the middle of the divorce. Both parents remarried. They had two houses that were very different. One was with my mom and my stepdad, and that wound up being very volatile and a lot of like violence in the house, a lot of anger issues for my stepdad. The other one was my dad and my stepmom, who I only saw like 2 weeks out of the year, so not very much. But my dad was very, I guess you could say, like not there, wasn't at all, and very narcissistic. So in both families, there was a lot of pressure for me to and to constantly be aware of everyone else's emotions. And that created a nice life of me getting into addiction. So a lot of like drug and alcohol use and getting into abusive relationships. Like I can definitely say it took me a long time to learn how to spot abuse and how to get out of that and walk away from it. Like just putting myself in a lot of dangerous situations, and I did not know like you could say no. Like I just didn't know that that was an option. It was like if someone asked me to do something, I'm saying yes,
Mhm.
right? Because that's what I was taught. And so yeah, I just wound up in just a pretty miserable, anxious, like depressed place where I felt like everyone around me had control. Like the only thing I really had control over was like school and career. And that stuff came really easily and came really naturally. But like the personal life stuff, it was super messy.
Yes. I recognize what you're saying. I think boundaries, and especially setting your boundaries and maintaining your boundaries, becomes very difficult for, especially for children who have gone through a trauma or a traumatic event in their life. It could indeed be a divorce or separation of parents. It could be physical abuse. It can be emotional abuse. It can be sexual abuse
Yeah.
because that I have to laugh because I can see your dog in the background. Oh,
My little kitty.
Teddy,
She's
sorry.
saying hi. It's
I
okay.
could only
She
see an
she looks
ear.
funky.
Yeah,
She has no hair.
I love it. So, as a child, you didn't have the luxury of saying no. You couldn't say no. I don't want you to get married. No, I don't want to have two different rooms in two different houses. No, I don't want to have to behave this way there and that way there. And you couldn't say no to all the changes that were going on because you're a child and you're dependent on your parents. And the same goes for abuse. Is if it's emotional, physical, sexual, it doesn't really matter. They cross a boundary. And then you sort of learn early on as a child that boundaries are worthless.
Mm-hmm.
They are not being honored, and
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really matter what you want. People will do whatever they want.
Exactly. Yeah. And in a lot of ways, you don't learn that boundaries even exist. Like you
Mhm.
have no autonomy, you have no control over yourself. Like when there's abuse going on, you have no control over your own body, right? Like someone else has that control over you. And so we learn how to survive those situations by making sure everyone around us is happy,
Yes.
right? And so we have to people please in order to keep ourselves safe and to survive that stuff. And so those survival skills then, I don't know, carry with us into adult life, maybe when abuse isn't even there anymore, but the people pleasing starts to become like us self-harming without us being aware that we're self-harming.
It has become the new normal, right? The people
Yeah.
pleasing has become so normal that you have never recognized it as a problem to begin with. And you're most of the time not even aware that you're doing it because it's become your second nature. And indeed, you're right. It was a survival strategy that kept you
Mhm.
safe. So it really served the purpose when it started. But then you grow up and you get a voice, and if someone tries to physically, emotionally, or sexually abuse you, you can say, to hell with it, I'm leaving. I don't have to take this. I don't want to see you, or whatever form it takes.
Mhm.
And especially for people who've had this type of abuse in the past, this is already very difficult to say these things, to walk away from it. They tend to become victims of similar situations as adults. But at least as adults, we somewhere along the line hopefully learn that we can say no, or that we can walk away, or that we can determine our own life. But when we are stuck in people pleasing mode, and I'm a recovering people pleaser, so I know
Me too, girl. Welcome to the club.
high five. It's very difficult to let that go because it's tied into your persona, your identity. And for me, it started because I wanted to fit in. I also wanted to
Hmm.
have friends, and I wanted them to like me, and I
Right.
wanted to be invited to parties. I wanted to have a boyfriend. Later, you
Hmm.
want to have a job. So there are a variety of reasons for the behavior that we are showing, but it sort of eats at you because when things happen that you are also okay with, then the boundary setting thing is not that big of a problem. But when things happen that you are uncomfortable with, or that you don't like, or that you would rather have seen differently,
Hmm.
then it starts to become a problem. And if you then don't learn how to stand up for yourself, how to determine what your boundaries actually are, because that's what I see already being a big problem. Most people are not even aware of what their boundaries are. So, how can you defend your boundaries or communicate your boundaries when you have no idea that you have boundaries or what they are?
People don't even know the word boundaries.
Yes.
I remember learning about boundaries and my brother and his wife also learning about boundaries and all three of us technically talking to my mom about boundaries. And my mom is a huge people pleaser.
Mhm.
And so immediately when we start using this word, she's like, "What are these boundaries? I don't like boundaries. Boundaries, um, it- moms don't need boundaries." Like she still to this day is having a really hard time. This is like years ago now, but even to this day, she's having a really hard time with the concept of boundaries. She sees them as like something negative
Yes.
and not really understanding like the concept, entirely. And I feel like a lot of people think that when they hear boundaries, it's like, oh, I'm pushing people away. And like, I don't want to do that because, like you said, we want to be accepted, right? Like, so much of people pleasing is wanting to be accepted and loved. Like, that's just all we want as humans, not realizing proper use of boundaries is actually to make it possible for our relationships to be super fulfilling and super close and super vulnerable.
Yes.
but we can't get there without boundaries, because without boundaries, you're going to people please until you burn out, and then resentment's going to pop up, and you're probably going to leave that relationship without even learning how to communicate.
And the weird thing is that as children, we are actively looking for boundaries, right? And
Mhm.
as we think that's normal, children are supposed to be looking for boundaries. How far can I go? What can I say? What is still accepted? And then boundary searching is
Mhm.
seen as a very normal thing, but it's only a certain type of boundary that's then being seen as a normal thing. Because when a child says, "No, I don't want you to touch me this way,"
Mhm.
then it becomes different.
Yeah. Well, especially when it comes to power and control,
Yes.
right? Like if there's power and control, a boundary is meaning you don't have control over someone else, right? Boundaries are for us. If we have control over ourselves, that means someone else cannot control us. And
Mhm.
abuse of any type is all about controlling someone else.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. And it's about, well, but most of in life actually is about power. It's not just in relationships, it's also in business, in money, in many different areas. It's about control. And if you haven't learned how to feel your boundaries, and a word that to me is connected to it is limits,
Mhm.
right? What your limits are, then you don't know where to put your boundary.
Yeah.
If you have never learned that you are enough, that you have worth, that you are lovable, that you are beautiful, that you are worthwhile, then it becomes very difficult to say no when you feel uncomfortable with something because the people pleasing part is much better developed.
Yeah. No, definitely. I feel like that reminds me so much of like so many relationships I had as a young adult. Um, and I was learning how to have healthier relationships. I still was such a huge people pleaser. I remember dating this guy, and he asked me if I wanted kids and wanted to get married, and I knew that's what he wanted, so I said yes. Um, Thinking that I'm going to like have this guy's babies because that's what he wanted.
Mhm.
And I remember him like I was in school working as a waitress, you know, just had a lot on my plate. And he was a business owner, a lot on his plate, but for him, he wanted me to really show up and kind of like take over household duties, right? Like very gender role specific. And I was like 21, 22, so I don't know any better. I was just like, yeah, okay, let me try to do this. I'm cooking breakfast, cooking lunch, cooking dinner, making his lunches, like doing the laundry. And I'm like a child in a lot of ways, trying to balance going to school full time and working a job myself, and just like having so much resentment being built up, like so much resentment. But the people pleaser in me is, oh, this is what this person wants. I need to become that person so that they'll love me and that they'll stay with me.
And it's not even a conscious process, right? Because
Mm-mm.
when I was in a similar relationship like what you're describing, it was just something I did. I came out of my family situation where, it was already very normal to act that way. And with him, I just fulfilled that role. It wasn't even
Mm-hmm.
that black and white that you are aware of it. It's just you do that. And eventually I started feeling like a cross between his mother and his housekeeper, which was not a good
Mm-hmm.
combination. And that led to frustration and friction and anger
Yes.
eventually on my part, which eventually
Yep.
also led to the end of the relationship.
Exactly. Yeah. And back then, I did not know how to even break up with a person.
Neither.
Like, so I would self-sabotage when I wanted to get out. So I would like essentially cheat and then tell the person that I cheated, and then they would break up with me. And so that was like just so much easier for me. Or cheating in front of I remember like making out with someone in front of my boyfriend because I wanted out of the relationship and I couldn't say it. And yeah, it all kind of comes back when I look back now, knowing what I know, like, oh, maybe if I would have talked about these things and told them what I'm okay with and not okay with, maybe that relationship could have worked out.
Mhm.
Like I don't know because all I did was just whatever you said, I'm gonna be that person. I'm gonna do it. And there's
Yeah.
only so long that you can like maintain the facade
Mhm.
and like be someone else. It is so hard to keep up.
Mhm.
And I had this quote that I really like to share with people now. It's a question to ask yourself, like, do you want to be liked for pretending to be someone that you're not? Or do you want to be loved for who you truly are?
Mhm. Yes, that is an excellent question, but lots of
Yeah.
people don't even know the difference, or that there is a difference, or that you could choose. So it starts with awareness, right? Because it's yeah, awareness, and then getting to know yourself really well,
Hmm.
discovering who you truly are. I remember when I left that relationship, I didn't even know what my hobbies were or what I
Hmm.
liked to do in my free time. I had sort of automatically simulated him, and we did his hobbies, listened to his music, with his family, his friends, and I had completely lost my personality. But I already didn't have a strong grasp on who I actually was when I started the relationship to begin with, because I had already played a part in my household where I grew up with my
Yeah.
parents in our family.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. And it's so hard to have awareness around this stuff until you know about it.
Yes.
Like we don't know what we don't know. And especially if everyone else around us is doing it.
Yeah, well, that's also a big factor. I'm glad that you're bringing that up, because indeed, when I stick for myself, but also when I speak to my clients, most of us, when we look around and we think, oh, but everybody is more or less unhappy and everybody is going through the motions. And then you sort of assume that that's the way it's supposed to be, but that's
Hmm.
not it. And uh, I've often talked about the fact that I think that our school system is severely lacking, because we
Mm.
learn facts and factual knowledge and
Oh my gosh.
skills that they say that you're going to use as an adult that I've never ever had to use as an adult. But the things that I actually need to use and would have loved to learn, we don't learn in school. We don't learn to communicate with our bodies, be connected to our bodies, discover what the signals are, how to handle the signals, what they mean, what actions to take. We don't learn about nonviolent communication and expressing our wants and our needs in a constructive way. We don't learn about intuition. We don't learn about boundaries, boundary settings, healthy relationships, healthy attachment style. And I can go on. There's a long list. And these would have been skills that would have been really handy to have learned
Hmm.
in school.
Yeah. I feel like the only thing we learned about in school was how to say no to drugs and say no to sex,
Oh, yeah.
which like teaching abstinence is just not, it's not the answer.
No.
But I do a boundaries workshop where I have people practice asking for what they want
Hmm.
and they practice also saying no, like in real time. And it's a powerful experience. And the last exercise we do is we go around collecting hugs. Like you have to ask people, obviously, if you can have a hug, but you also have to tell one person no. So you have to reject someone.
Hmm.
And that experience brings up so much for people. Like they feel so bad disappointing someone or letting someone down. Like it's so much, we are uncomfortable seeing someone else uncomfortable.
Yes.
And we just have not been conditioned that that's like normal. Like we
Mm.
have put this pressure that everyone has to take care of your emotions versus you taking care of your own emotions. And so when I do this workshop, I'm always like, I wish I learned this in the first grade. Like, I wish I was doing this workshop in the first grade. Like, it would have been so helpful as a child to learn to ask for my needs and to learn to ask for what I want and know that I can say no when I mean no and I can say yes when I mean yes.
Hmm.
And it's just like so much more complex than just no to drugs and no to sex, especially because, at some point in time, a lot of us do want to try those things. So
Yeah,
there
and
are
there's also
yeses.
nothing wrong with trying it. I think you need to
Yeah.
learn responsibility and the consequences of actions. And I'm really glad that you're sharing this, because there was a moment in my life where I also didn't know that I could say no to things. I am naturally
Mhm.
blonde. I had ringlets when I was younger. So I looked like an angelic child, right? With the beautiful blonde
Mhm.
hair and then the blue eyes and then in this beautiful dress. And lots of people wanted to hug me or pick me up or
Mm.
doing things like that, and I hated it. I hated every second of it, but I couldn't say it, so you had to sort of suffer through it. And
Mhm.
then a couple of years ago I did a big event. I was I think a symposium, a 3-day symposium, and at the halfway point, I think, or maybe it was the end, not important, they did this hug thing where there were, well, I think 1,000 people there, and everybody
Mhm.
had to get up and just walk across the room and then hug everybody. And I was like, oh my God.
That was just like a
So,
rule across the board, like you just have to hug people.
yes,
Oh
everybody
my
just had
gosh.
to hug people. So people you've never met before, you've never talked before, would come up to you and would want to hug you.
That was like
And
so triggering for you.
exactly. And I was like, no. So it was one of the first
Oh
times
my
that I actually
gosh.
said, No, I don't feel comfortable being hugged by people I don't know. It's no." So I
Mhm.
only accepted hugs from people that I had interacted with during the
Mhm.
seminar, because we did workshops together or certain exercises together or something like that. And there were also people there that had this vibe, this energy that I think, who, right? No, stay away from me. And yeah, this is something that you need to learn, especially when your boundaries have been, well, obliterated somewhere along
Mhm.
your life, your journey, where you need to relearn that it's okay to say, well, I appreciate that you want to hug me, but no, thank you.
Mhm. Exactly. I mean, how was that experience for you when you said no?
Liberating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also the fact that even though some people didn't react to it really well, that I didn't really care about that. I was just really proud for sticking
Good.
for myself and being able to say, well, no, just no.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's another thing that is hard is when people don't react well to our boundaries.
Hmm.
Like when we're first practicing boundaries and people are like not liking it, especially when they're used to you not having boundaries, they
Yes.
benefit. So when they're not benefiting, like you're taking the cookies away. You're saying no more cookies. And of course, anyone is going to get upset that they can't have their cookie, but it's hard. It's hard to sit there and watch someone else get upset and like not try to calm them down or fix it or help them through their emotions. And we know, like, oh, if I just say yes, like they'll feel better.
Hmm.
That's so hard,
Yes.
but it's so liberating when you can finally do it. It just reminded me of
Yeah.
something. I first got my own apartment, and it was like just me, and I really really wanted people to take their shoes off. Like I did not want people wearing shoes in my apartment. All hardwood floors. I live in downtown. It's like hepatitis B and C on the streets. Like it's nasty. People are pooping on there. So I was so terrified when people started coming over to ask people to take their shoes off.
Yeah.
And I could not. And so they would leave and I would beat myself up like, why could I not ask people to take their shoes off? Like, why could I not ask them? And so finally, my first safe person, I like to say that I can say whatever to her. She's my best friend and I'm so safe with her. So I ask her, she comes over, she's the first person I say it to, like, hey, can you take your shoes off? A little bit later in the day, we had some other people come over, and she just, in 2 seconds, yells at them to take their shoes off, like nothing. And I remember thinking, like, why is it so easy for her to tell people to take their shoes off, but not me? Like, why is it so hard for me? And so little by little, I started asking people to take their shoes off, like not confidently, very uncomfortably. Um, and now today, like this has been a few years now, I just like I'm the one to enforce the law. When people are not taking their shoes off, they're like, I don't want to. I'm like, okay, well, you can go sit in a chair that's near the door and not walk around in the house. And I don't feel bad being the shoe police. But it took practice. Like
Yeah.
it is a skill to learn
Mm.
just to be able to do that, especially
Yes.
something as small as shoes, right?
I
Like
have
it
the
can be
same
so
rule.
scary.
I have a big basket with slippers or house shoes next to my front door in all shapes and sizes. So I
Mm-hmm.
ask people to take off their shoes and then just to pick a couple of slippers to walk around in the house with, because it's something I like, and it's became an issue when I wanted to sell my house, and the realtor did take his shoes off when I asked, but then when everybody came to view the house, he would allow them to walk through the house with their shoes
Oh my
on,
gosh, that would drive me nuts.
even though we had talked about it before. And he said that we would arrange for some these booties that they also wear on crime scenes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he
Mm-hmm.
wasn't doing it, so that was one of my frustration points.
Did you
But
fire
we
him?
Yeah, I ended for many reasons, this being one of them. I ended all
Yeah.
working relationships
It's
because
like
it's
if you can't honor a small boundary, it's probably a sign that there's more going on with that person, that they're not going to honor a big boundary.
exactly, yes. And you reminded me of another thing that's also very important. A lot of people feel that they need to give an explanation for their no.
Mm.
And I understand where that is coming from. It's because you don't want people to be disappointed. So you're trying to explain that you mean it in the best possible way and that you're not insulting them and you're not rejecting them and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But in the end, a no is a no, and you do not have to explain it
Mm-hmm.
if you don't want to.
That's so true. And I actually like to tell people that have this issue because some people, they have a really hard time just saying no, and that's totally normal. Like the people pleaser in us, it can feel really harsh to only put a no. So,
Yes.
what I suggest is people make a suggestion of what they want instead. So kind of starting to work towards compromise
Hmm.
because we don't want to have too rigid of boundaries where we're like, oh my gosh, here's all these walls and you cannot get in, right? We do want flexibility. And so compromise and discussion can be really helpful, right? Like your booties, that is a compromise. Like, here, take your shoes off, but here are these booties that you can wear instead. I actually love that. That is so adorable. And yeah, so if you had no feels too harsh, like come up with a suggestion of what would work better for you. And then you guys can talk it out of what could work better for both of you. And people do like suggestions. So you will see their defenses come down when they receive the suggestion because again, people want to say yes. So they might just say yes to your suggestion because,
Hmm.
they don't want to say no.
And obviously, it also really depends on the person, right? Because
Yeah.
as a business owner, I'm sure you're familiar with the selling through DMs and the
Mm-hmm.
sheer buttload of people that you get in your DMs in any type of social
I
media that
know.
want something from you, or the
Yeah.
emails that you're getting with people offering your services. And there's nothing wrong when somebody offers you something you didn't ask for to just say, no, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah,
Guess
that
what?
was
No,
kind
thank
of
you.
interesting when I first started my business. I wasn't expecting that. I thought I would be getting like all these referrals and all these clients. And I'm like, all I'm getting are people wanting me to be their client. Like, this is strange.
Yes. Yeah, but there was this huge wave or this huge teaching someone started that this was the way to go. And in the beginning, I would either be angry or I would try to, sort of read them the riot act. Or sometimes I would say, well, what if you hired me and I taught you a method to actually sell something to a person in a way that they would want to be sold to? Would that be
Mm-hmm.
valuable to you? And turn the
Mm-hmm.
thing around. Most of the time now, I think delete.
Mm. Yeah, definitely, definitely. I have um informed people like, hey, I'm like not looking to, invest in anything at this point in time. And some people have been really cool about it. And they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, no, totally. I just want to be here for support. And like we've almost become like networking connections out of it. And then there's other people like they just are down to business and then they leave on their own. They're like, okay, yeah, let me know if things change. And then I never hear from them again.
Yes. Well, and some people can also be very rude when you tell
Mm-hmm.
them no, and not only the DMs in business wise, but also in real life. And that's also something you need to be prepared for. And a thing that really helped me with the no saying, especially when it came to myself, was the realization that when I say no to something, I'm actually saying yes to myself. And the more you
Mm-hmm.
start to love yourself, the more you start to value yourself, the easier it becomes to say no. For instance, one of my best friends says, or we had already planned to go and do to get a drink in the city.
Mm-hmm.
But the day itself, I'm feeling extremely tired and I have a major headache. And all I want to do is just take some aspirin and go to bed, or chill on the couch a little bit with the kitties and then go to bed, something like that. But I'm definitely not in the mood to go to a bar or a pub with lots of noise
Mm-hmm.
and lots of people while I'm feeling this way. And the old me would have just sucked it up and went there because I had promised, and my promises mean something. I don't want to disappoint someone, so I promised to be there. I'm going to be there no matter what. The
Mm-hmm.
new me recognizes that it will take me days to recover from this. It's not in my best interest. And if you turn things around and I would ask my friend, what would you prefer? That I said nothing, that I would show up and come while I'm having a headache and I'm not really enjoying myself? Or would you want me to be honest and just say to you, hey, Sally, I know that
Mm-hmm.
we had plans to go for a drink, and I honestly was looking forward to it. But
Mm-hmm.
today has been a hell day. I'm feeling absolutely crappy. I have a major headache. So could we do a rain check?
Exactly. Exactly. And sometimes it upsets me when other people don't know their boundaries and they do something like that where they force themselves to come to an event with me and then they're miserable. And I'm like, could you have just told me you didn't want to do this and not shown up? Because I would rather do this by myself and enjoy it than have you here in a bad mood. And that's where I like to tell people like boundaries are there to preserve your relationships. They're there to like bring people closer. Because when we don't have them, like, and we're pushing ourselves, like, we're going to be miserable eventually, and no one's going to enjoy that. But if we have limits and we have expectations and we are asking for our needs, then we can be happy in relationships and we can be aware of other people's happiness at the same
Yes.
time, right? It doesn't have to be one or the other. Everyone can get what they want in some form or fashion if you're willing to communicate about it.
Yes,
Then you just have such a deeper connection.
for
And if
sure.
you notice that someone else is reacting badly to your boundaries, like that is a red flag. Like learning to walk away is a skill, and sometimes it's needed, or even just like de escalation, right? Like maybe we don't need to have them as your concert going friend, but you can have them as like your coffee friend,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. As that's why I teach a lot of my clients to turn it around.
Yeah.
Like your example, if the roles had been reversed, would you have wanted your friend to be honest with you and maybe
Yeah.
take a rain check so that you could go by yourself or with a different friend and had the
Hmm.
time of your life?
Yeah.
Or would you have want to have a night like this, where they are feeling grumpy and their mood drags you down with them. Usually
Yeah.
when you turn it around, they are like, no, I would want them to be honest with me. I would want them to just communicate about it. Okay, so well, why didn't you do it then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, that's confronting.
I love turning things around on people, especially when people say like offensive things and you know they have crossed your boundary. Like, oh,
Hmm.
that is blatant. And you kind of ask it in like a curious way. Like, how do you think you would feel if I said that to you?
Hmm. That's a good one.
How do you think your favorite person in the world would feel if you said that to them?
Hmm. I love that. That's something I often do. Sometimes I also use humor or shock. It kind
Oh,
of
yeah, I
depends
love
on the
humor.
person. And so I
Yeah.
was talking the other day to my upstairs neighbor, and he is autistic, and his girlfriend was standing there, and he was telling a story that was so degrading, and
Mm,
his audience was two women. And he was
hmm.
having the time of his life sharing it. I saw his girlfriend become angrier and angrier and angrier. And when he was done, I put this really big smile on my face and I said, shall I kick you in the nuts right now or shall I wait a minute?
Mm,
And he was
mm-hmm.
like, what? What
Mm-hmm.
are you talking about? And I asked him, do you listen when you speak?
Mm-hmm.
I'm still not getting it. I said, you're telling such a women unfriendly story to two women.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Would you be happy if I would tell a guy degrading story with lots of happiness and cheer and then expect you to like it?
Mm-hmm.
Ah, yes.
And then he got it.
Sometimes people need help to understand what is going on or to have a different perspective or a different insight when it comes to boundaries or communicating around it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, the way we communicate boundaries is so important because, like, in that moment, right, you could have lost it on
Oh,
him.
yeah, I could have easily kicked him in the nuts without even
Yeah. And
warning.
that could have been so messy, but like a lot of times, unless it's abuse, I always want to put that as a caveat. Like, unless it's abuse,
Mm,
people don't mean to cross their boundaries.
no.
Like, they don't. So, communicating it is, we have to teach and like paying attention to tone and like using humor and like usually people do have good intention. It's just it doesn't get received the way that they're intending it. But when it comes to abuse, like you got to do whatever you can to protect yourself, and
For sure.
all communication rules go out the window. You
Yes. Protect
do
yourself at any cost.
at
Yes.
any cost. If you need to be fiery, be fiery. If you need to actually kick them in the balls, kick them in the balls. Like,
Yeah.
all rules go out the window when we're talking
Yeah.
about abuse. And that abuse is
Exactly.
intentional, right? Like, you're intentionally trying to control someone else. You're intentionally
Yeah.
trying to harm someone else.
You're absolutely right. He didn't want to hurt us in any way. He
Yeah,
genuinely thought it was a really funny story. He just
right.
hadn't thought about the rest of that story or in relationship to his audience. But when I did what I did, you saw the anger and the tension drain out of the girlfriend. And she was standing there and she was looking and she was like, oh, right. And you saw
Hmm.
her. And I think that that is part of why I chose to do it in this way, because I could have
Right.
also walked away and not be bothered by it. But she was really, really angry. So that we're heading towards a massive fight, which I also knew from experience he wouldn't understand either. So this was sort of diffusing the situation with humor, which benefited both of them in the end.
I love that. Humor is, I know, like in the therapy world, they talk about like don't use humor to
Mm,
mask your emotions. But I'm like, it's a really great way of coping, honestly.
yes.
Because we can
Yeah.
jump straight to anger, but if we can get to humor first, it's a really good de-escalator.
Yeah, but also if you talk about vibration and keeping yourself at a high frequency, then it's
Yeah.
better to deflect to humor instead of getting all riled up about it and becoming angry and letting it ruin your day, because
Mhm.
it takes a lot more work to get yourself back to a good feeling state and high vibration state,
Yeah.
than when you just laugh about it or joke about it or something. And of course there are a variety of ways of doing this. If you use it as an escapism to escape
Mhm.
reality, then yes, humor is not the best way. I've also seen many examples of this one, but if you use it to diffuse a situation or to just stay in the positive light while still making people aware of their actions and what the response could have been,
Right.
then I'm all for it.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
definitely. You know what? I have this short story really quick. My best friend, whenever she gets pulled over, which I'm not going to say it's a lot, but it's been enough times in her lifetime, she says, if I can make the cop laugh, I know I'm getting out of the ticket.
Hmm.
Happens every time. She's really
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
So always able to get out of the ticket.
Yeah, but it really depends on how you respond, right? If you do, oh, you asshole, and you always you need to
Mhm.
have me, or you go into an argument or something negative with a police officer, then you're getting a ticket. It doesn't really matter. But if you're like, really? I did that? Oh my God. Oh, that's so bad of myself. I wasn't aware. I'm so glad that you're pointing this out to me. They're like, don't do it in the future. Of course, officer.
I feel like the blonde hair helps with that role.
For
They're like, and
sure.
being a woman, they're like, oh, she just didn't know.
I use the dumb blonde thing whenever
Yeah,
it suits. People tend to underestimate you when you're blonde because they assume you don't have any intelligence, which can
right.
work in your advantage sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, talking about boundaries, like if someone is asking you to do something that you really don't want to do, you can just pretend like you don't know how. I'm
Yes.
not sure I can even do that. How would I do that? I'm sorry. That's my alarm going off saying I need to get to my next appointment.
Yes, you are absolutely right. We are nearing the end of our wonderful interview. I've been loving it. So, listeners, viewers out there, I can imagine that you've loved it as much as I loved having it. But I can also imagine that you might want to know where to find Brittany. So, I want you, Brittany, to tell everybody where they can find you. And everybody, I want you to share your biggest insight after listening to our interview in the comments while Brittany tells you where you can find her.
Yeah, definitely. So the best place to find me is Instagram. I am the most active on there. All my links to my website and email, whatever it is on there. I do answer my DMs. I can't do therapy through Instagram, so don't try. But if you have any questions about boundaries just in general, you can leave me a question and I can create a post around it to respond. So Brittany is spelled Brittaney, does therapy.
I love it. I will make sure that the link that you just told everybody about is included in the show notes. They will probably be below this video, but they could also be somewhere around it, depending on where you're catching this episode. While you're at it, I would also love it if you're a new viewer that you subscribed to our channel. Maybe hit the notification bell and do a like. And of course, like I asked, leave a comment. And if you thought that this was a really valuable talk, then it would mean the world to both of us if you would share it with your tribe, because you never know who you know that needs to hear this message today. And you would be doing both them and us a really big service by sharing this episode. For today, I want to first start with thanking. I want to thank everybody that's watching, that's listening, that's always showing support. I love you. Keep on doing that. And of course, I want to thank you, Brittany, for being my guest and for having this wonderful talk about boundaries. I loved it.
Of course, so happy to do it. So happy to be here.
Well, there you have it, boundaries and why boundaries matter. I thank you for watching, for being here, for your support, and I wish you an amazing rest of your day. And I look forward to sharing another wonderful guest for next week's episode. Bye for now.